The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves. Finally managed to get myself a copy, finally sat down, watched it through, and I'll be honest, when this film was first being made and people were saying what it was going to be, I got rather confused about it. I personally thought this was supposed to be a prequel to Ben Affleck's Batman, showing him in his younger days when he was first starting out, but then people told me that wasn't the case, and this film essentially is its own thing. It's not part of the DCEU, but it is going to be its own separate trilogy away from DCEU, doing its own thing. So, overall, what do I think of this film? Honestly, I think it's pretty good, but I do have one critique of it that I guess might be a little divisive, but let's leave that for the end. So this film is, as I said, very much in its own thing, and it's possibly a good thing it is because it's very noir. That's the main goal of it, to show Batman back in his roots in the noir settings. Batman, or Bruce Wayne in this case, being played by former Twilight and Harry Potter star Robert Pattinson. Now, this is supposed to show Batman in his early days. He's only been Batman for 2 years, so he's still fairly young at it. And while Robert Pattinson being 36 isn't necessarily young, but you can definitely accept the fact that he is still in his early days. So he ends up on the trail of a mysterious serial killer known as the Riddler, played by Paul Dano. I mean, this version, it's not Edward Nygma, it's Edward Nashton, who he used to be an accountant for the underground world, but then he grew disillusioned with people, especially since he had grown up in an orphanage and he's seen the way that rich orphans compared to poor orphans, how they deal with things, and now he's after certain people in power who he considers corrupt. Along the way, he meets up with a cat burglar and an underground waitress named Selena Kyle, played by Zoe Kravitz, who of course becomes Catwoman. He allies himself with a cop on the NYPD named James Gordon, played by Jeffrey Wright, and in the process they, working together with his butler Alfred, played by Andy Serkis, they try to bring down a gang leader named Carmine Falcone, played by John Turturro, as well as encountering the villainous Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin, played by Colin Farrell. But Batman in this film, there's a lot going on in this film, because it turns out that Riddler is after a lot of people, including Bella Real, played by Jamie Lawson, who's running to be Gotham City's latest mayor. And as I said, there's a lot going on in this film, but I will admit the casting in this film is particularly good. I mean, I know that we were all sceptical about Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne, but here's the thing. Pretty much every casting of Batman over the last few years has been criticised, or people think, really? Him? Like Michael Keaton back in the 1980s when he was cast as Batman, people were thinking, really? I mean, the guy's a comedy guy. You can't have him play Batman, but everyone was proven wrong. Same goes for Christian Bale and Ben Affleck. So, honestly, if we criticise it, then that probably means it's going to be really good. And also, I do like the interpretation they did of the Riddler. I mean, as you can see from the cane behind me, Riddler is one of my favourite Batman villains, if not my favourite Batman villain in all the comics. However, this version, I will admit, is different from previous versions. I mean, the versions played by Frank Gorshin, Jim Carrey, or even the guy from Smallville, John Glover. Even John Glover. I mean, all of those lean more into the comedy side of the Riddler, showing that more of him as a cackling comedy villain, like someone who knows he's in control and is having fun with it, whereas Paul Dano's version of Riddler is very different, and I will admit there were times when he was actually scary. Like, whenever he put on his mask and just started yelling into the camera, he's a scary guy. And they do, I think, showed how deviated his mind had become, how devious, and ultimately how scary the guy could actually be. And I will admit that this film is actually really good, and I know they are doing sequels to this film. They plan to turn this film into a separate trilogy, and I would like to see them how they do or reinvent certain villains in the Batman franchise. I mean, okay, with this film alone, we know that there's Riddler, we know there's a Catwoman, we know there's a Penguin. But it would also be cool to see some of the other villains of Batman's Rogues Gallery, like Mr. Freeze, Poison Ivy, Two-Face, Bane, Harley Quinn, Scarecrow, Hush, the Al Ghouls, or even the Court of Owls. I think the Court of Owls would be brilliant here. Now, it's fair to say that this Batman is a lot more grounded, as I said. It's very film noir, and I think that actually works very well in the film's favour, because a lot of Batman's villains over the last few years have become a bit sci-fi, or more kind of superpowers based. I mean, the two that I do feel on the list that could maybe definitely become more kind of tip more into around the sci-fi or supervillain would be Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy. But given how well they did with this film reinventing the Riddler and showing how scary a villain he could be, I'd love to see what they could actually do with villains and how they would interpret some of their powers. I mean, even making Mr. Freeze, you could take away the freeze gun and just have him just do stuff with regular ice, and I think that would be a good film. Now, as I said, I do have one small gripe about this film, although actually the one other villain who I didn't mention, I mean, as I said, they've got Catwoman, they've got Riddler, they've got Penguin, and there's also a hint at the end that Joker does exist in this world as well, played by a new actor, this time Barry Keoghan. And it's never confirmed that it's him, but come on. With that laugh and that kind of devious smile, you know it's going to be the Joker behind there. So, yeah. But, as I said, there is... while I admit this probably is a good film, I view it the same way I view the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Now, hear me out on this. I watched through I saw in cinemas when it came out the Whedon cut of Justice League. And I'll admit, I like the Whedon cut. I know people say there's problems with it and that it's kind of too much humour and it feels a little bit out of place, but here's the thing, I honestly enjoy the Whedon cut. However, when the Snyder Cut of Justice League got that, when it finally came out on DVD, I bought it, I stuck it in, I watched it through, and I was like, okay, depending on both versions of this film are different, and which one I prefer honestly would depend on what kind of mood I'm in. Like, if I want to watch something that is just superhero, good time, action, fun, and some humour here and there, I'd probably stick on the Whedon cut. Like, don't hate me, I like the Whedon cut. However, the Snyder Cut is arguably the better film, and if I wanted something that I can generally appreciate as a work of art, then yeah, I would probably stick on the Snyder Cut. However, the Snyder Cut is one that I don't feel I could rewatch multiple times. Like, it's the kind of film that you possibly would only watch it once or maybe twice a year, because they pack a lot into that film, and it does get a little emotionally draining. Like, the Snyder Cut is ultimately the better film, however, I do feel the Whedon Cut is more watchable. And that's kind of what I feel here with the Batman. I mean, maybe my opinion will change with time, but this film is just over 2.5 hours long, nearly 3 with the credits, and they pack a lot into that time. Like, this film is very heavy. As I say, it's got a lot going on. There's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of kind of noir action and detective work, and your mind you do keep up with it, but then it's not a film that I feel I would rewatch kind of multiple times in, say, a month or 2 months or even a year. It would be one that I would rewatch it every now and again and say, yes, this is a good film, but it's not a popcorn flick. It's not one that you would kind of sit down with and have a good time with. It's one that you would actually persevere with. And that's kind of what I feel with the Batman. Like, it's a good film, but it's a lot, and it does leave you a little emotionally drained, or at least it did with me. But as I said, this is a good film, and I'm excited to see where they can go with this particular universe. What changes they could make to some of the villains, whether they could actually make them kind of interesting and different, and where they could go with ones they've already introduced. Like, I know that Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman, bit of a spoiler alert, at the end of the film, she leaves Gotham, tending to just leave and make a fresh start somewhere else. But I do hope they bring her back, and, I feel she had good chemistry with Robert Pattinson. So overall with this film, I'd say it's a little emotionally draining, but in the end, it is a good film, and you should check it out if you haven't done so already. So there you go, there's my quick little review of Matt Reeves' The Batman. As I said, I don't think it's a popcorn flick, but it's definitely one that you will check out every so often. Anyway, until next time, see ya.